Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more mythology, the stories of Greek mythology. When last we left off, we were starting on the earliest heroes, and that's what we'll be jumping into. It starts off with the story of Prometheus and Io. The materials for this story are taken from two poets, the Greek Aeschylus and the Roman Ovid, separated from the other by 400 years and 450 years, and still more by their gifts and temperaments. They are the best sources for the tale. It is easy to distinguish the parts told by each. Aeschylus gave grave and direct, Ovid light and amusing. The touch about lovers' lies is a characteristic of Ovid, as also the little story about the Syrinx. In those days, when Prometheus had just given fire to men, and when he was first bound to the rocky peak on Caucasus, he had a strange visitor. A distracted, fleeing creature came clambering awkwardly up over the cliffs and crags to where he lay. It looked like a heifer, but talked like a girl who seemed mad with misery. The sight of Prometheus stopped her short. She cried, "This that I see, a form storm-beaten, bound to the rock. Did you do wrong? Is this your punishment? Where am I? Speak to a wretched wanderer. Enough, I have been tried enough, my wandering, long wandering, yet I have found nowhere to leave my misery. I am a girl who speak to you, but horns are on my head." Prometheus recognized her. He knew her story, and he spoke her name. "I know you, girl. Inachus's daughter, Io. You made the god's heart hot with love, and Hera hates you. She it is who drives you on this flight that never ends." Wonder checked Io's frenzy. She stood still, all amazed, her name spoken by this strange being in this strange, lonely place. She begged, "Who are you, sufferer, that speaks the truth to one who suffers?" And he answered, "You see Prometheus, who gave mortals fire." She knew him and his story. "You? He who succored the whole race of men? You, that Prometheus, the daring, the enduring?" They talked freely to each other. He told her how Zeus had treated him, and she told him that Zeus was the reason why she, once a princess and a happy girl, had been changed into a beast, a starving beast that frenzied runs with clumsy leaps and bounds. Oh, shame! Zeus's jealous wife, Hera, was the direct cause of her misfortunes. But back of them all was Zeus himself. He fell in love with her and sent ever to my maiden chamber visions of the night, persuading me with gentle words. Oh, happy, happy girl, why are you all too long a maid? The arrow of desire has pierced Zeus. For you he is on fire. For you it is his will to capture love. Always, each night, such dreams possessed me. But still greater than Zeus's love was his fear of Hera's jealousy. He acted, however, with very little wisdom for the father of the gods and men when he tried to hide Io and himself by wrapping the earth with a cloud so thick and dark that a sudden night seemed to drive the clear daylight away. Hera knew perfectly well that there was a reason for this odd occurrence, and constantly and instantly suspected her husband. When she could not find him anywhere in heaven, she glided swiftly down to the earth and ordered the cloud off. But Zeus, too, had been quick. As soon as she caught sight of him, he was standing beside a most lovely white heifer. Io, of course. He swore that he had never seen her until just now, when she had sprung forth newborn from the earth. And this, Ovid says, shows that the lies lovers tell do not anger the gods. However, it also shows that they are not very useful, for Hera did not believe a word of it. She said the heifer was very pretty, and would Zeus please make her a present of it. Sorry as he was, he saw at once that to refuse would give the whole thing away. What excuse would he make? An insignificant little cow. He turned Io reluctantly over to his wife, and Hera knew very well how to keep her away from him. She gave her into the charge of Argus, an excellent arrangement for Hera's purpose, since Argus had 100 eyes. Before such a watchman, who could sleep with some of the eyes and keep on guard with the rest, Zeus seemed helpless. He watched Io's misery, turned into a beast, driven from her home. He dared not come to her help. At last, however, he went to his son Hermes, the messenger of the gods, and told him he must find a way to kill Argus. There was no god cleverer than Hermes. As soon as he had sprung to earth from heaven, he laid aside everything that marked him as a god and approached Argus like a country fellow, playing very sweetly upon a pipe of reeds. Argus was pleased at the sound and called the musician to come nearer. "You might as well sit by me on the rock," he said. "You see, it's shady, just right for shepherds." Nothing could have been better for Hermes' plan, and yet nothing happened. He played, and then he talked on and on, as drowsily and monotonously as he could. Some of the 100 eyes would go to sleep, but some were always awake. At last, however, one story was successful about the god Pan, how he loved a nymph named Syrinx, who fled from him, and just as he was about to seize her, was turned into a tuft of reeds by her sister nymphs. Pan said, "Still you shall be mine," and he made from what she had become a shepherd's pipe of reeds and beeswax joined. The little story does not seem especially tiresome as such stories go, but Argos found it so. All of his eyes went to sleep. Hermes killed him at once, of course. But Hera took the eyes and set them in the tail of the peacock, her favorite bird. It seemed that Io was free, but no. Hera at once turned to her again. She sent a gadfly to plague her, which stung her to madness. Io told Prometheus, "He drives me all along the long sea strand. I may not stop for food or drink. He will not let me sleep." Prometheus tried to comfort her, but he could point her only to the distant future that lay immediately before her, and still more wandering and in fearsome lands. To be sure, the part of the sea that first ran along in her frenzy would be called Ionian after her. And the Bosphorus, which means the ford of the cow, would preserve the memory of when she went through it. But her real consolation must be that at long last she would reach the Nile, where Zeus would restore her to her human form. She would bear him a son named Epiphus, and live forever after happily and honored. And know this, that from your race will spring one glorious with the bow, bold-hearted, and he shall set me free. Io's descendant would be Hercules, greatest of heroes, than whom hardly the gods were greater, and to whom Prometheus would owe his freedom. Europa. This story, so like the Renaissance idea of the classical fantastic, delicately decorated, bright-colored, is taken entirely from a poem of the 3rd century Alexandrian poet Moschus, by far the best account of it. Io was not the only girl who gained geographical fame because Zeus fell in love with her. There was another known far more widely, Europa, the daughter of the king of Sidon. But whereas the wretched Io had to pay dearly for the distinction, Europa was exceedingly fortunate, except for a few moments of terror when she found herself crossing the deep sea on the back of a bull. She did not suffer at all. The story does not say what Hera was about at the time, but it is clear that she was off guard and her husband free to do as he pleased. Up in heaven one spring morning, as he idly watched the earth, Zeus suddenly saw a charming spectacle. Europa had waked early, troubled just as Io had been by a dream, only this time not of a god who loved her, but of 2 continents who, each in the shape of a woman, tried to possess her. Asia, saying that she had given her birth and therefore owned her, and the other, as yet nameless, declaring that Zeus would would give the maiden to her. Once awake from the strange vision which had come at dawn, the time when true dreams oftenest visit mortals, Europa decided not to try to go to sleep again, but to summon her companions, girls born in the same year as herself and all of noble birth, to go out with her to the lovely blooming meadows near the sea. Here was their favorite meeting place, whether they wanted to dance or bathe their fair bodies at the river mouth or gather flowers. This time all had brought baskets, knowing that the flowers were now at their perfection. Europa's was of gold, exquisitely chased with figures which showed, oddly enough, the story of Io, her journeys in the shape of a cow, the death of Argus, and Zeus lightly touching her with his divine hand and changing her back into a woman. It was, as may be perceived, a marvel worth gazing upon, and had been made by no less a personage than Hephaestus, the celestial workman of Olympus. Lovely as the basket was, there were flowers as lovely to fill it with. Sweet-smelling narcissus and hyacinths, and violets and yellow crocus, and most radiant of all, the crimson splendor of the wild rose. The girls gathered them delightedly, wandering here and there and over the meadow, each one a maiden fairest among the fair. Yet even so, Europa shone out among the goddess of love, as the goddess of love outshines her sister Graces. And it was that very goddess of love who brought about that what next happened. As Zeus in heaven watched the pretty scene, she who alone can conquer Zeus, along with her son, the mischievous boy Cupid, shot one of her shafts into his heart, and that very instant he fell madly in love with Europa. Even though Hera was away, he thought it well to be cautious, and before appearing to Europa, he changed himself into a bull. Not such a one as you might see in a stall or grazing in a field, but one beautiful beyond all bulls that ever were. Bright chestnut in color, with a silver circle on his brow, and horns like the crescent of a young moon. He seemed so gentle as well as so lovely that the girls were not frightened at his coming, but gathered around to caress him and to breathe the very heavenly fragrance that came from him, sweeter than even then the most flowery meadow. It was Europa he drew toward, and as she gently touched him, he lowed so musically no flute could give forth a more melodious sound. Then he lay down before her feet and seemed to show her his broad back, and she cried to the others to come with her and mount him. For surely he will bear on his back. He is so mild and dear and gentle to behold. He is not like a bull, but like a good true man, except he cannot speak. Smiling, she sat down on his back. But the others, quick through though they were to follow her, had no chance. The bull leaped up and at full speed rushed to the seashore, and then not into but over the wide water. As he went, the waves grew smooth before him, and the whole procession rose up from the deep and accompanied him. The strange sea gods, Herods, riding upon dolphins, and Tritons blowing their horns, and the mighty master of the sea himself, Zeus's own brother. Europa, frightened equally by the wondrous creatures she saw and the moving waters all around, clung with one hand to the bull's great horn, and with the other caught up her purple dress to keep it dry, and the winds swelled out the deep folds, even as a sail swells on a ship, and ever gently thus they wafted her. No bull could this be, thought Europa, but most certainly a god. And she spoke pleadingly to him, and begging him to pity her and not leave her in some strange place all alone. He spoke to her in answer and showed her she had guessed rightly what he was. She had no cause to fear, he told her. He was Zeus, greatest of the gods, and all he was doing was from love of her. He was taking her to Crete, his own island, where his mother had hidden him from Cronus when he was born, and there she would bear him. Glorious sons, whose scepters shall hold sway over all men on earth. Everything happened, of course, as Zeus had said. Crete came into sight, they landed, and the seasons, the gatekeepers of Olympus, arrayed her for her bridal. Her sons were famous men, that not only in this world, but in the next, where two of them, Minos and Rhadamanthus, were rewarded for their justice upon the earth by being made judges of the dead. But her own name remains the best known of all. So yeah, we end that piece there. We saw it was an example of some of the mortals who would become well known. And of course, Zeus's tendency to be like, damn, that girl fine, I want a piece of that. I mean, seriously, that's more or less how Zeus was. He was like, okay, baby. Zeus is that philandering man of want. Well, God of want. He saw a mortal girl he liked, he'd be like, damn, she looks good. So yeah. Now the second one wasn't really his fault so much as it was Aphrodite and Cupid. But yeah, Io is just another tale of his particular penchant for being like, damn, baby. But yeah. But poor Io, her descendant would be one of the most powerful demigods slash mortals out there. Hercules. Or I think his actual name was Heracles. Hercules, I believe, is the Latin version of it that was spoken in Rome. I think the Greek was Heracles. But yeah. And then, of course, Europa, they claim that the continent of Europe would, well, they didn't mention it by name, but essentially suggesting Europe gets its name from Europa. But yeah, Zeus seemingly couldn't keep it in his pants. He, yeah. And we'll see more. Well, we probably will see more stories of Zeus and his wandering ways. But we'll get to see other mortal heroes. Yeah. And then we'll get into stories of love and adventure. So we'll start to really get into some of the big adventures and stuff. Yeah, Zeus, he loved either coming down as Zeus or coming down as animals, as was the case with Europa. He came down as a bull, and there's other cases where he came down to meet mortal women disguised as an animal. Or I know there's a famous one where he comes down disguised as a goose. So yeah. Anyway, that'll be the end of this episode. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.